Good morning, and thank you for attending the Lake Friendly Living for Watershed Resiliency series of events. This morning's webinar is titled Developing a Community Rain Garden Project. My name is Adam Effler, and I will act as your host. Please be advised, this meeting is recorded and all attendees are muted. There will be an opportunity for answering questions at the end of the full webinar, following our panelist presentations. If you wish to ask questions during the webinar, please feel free to use the chat box feature within the Zoom portal, and your questions will be addressed at the end of this session. Now I will introduce the topic before introducing each panelist. This event will describe the experiences and outline the importance of building partnerships among community groups for a community rain garden project. Topics will include our motivation for the project and steps in planning the rain garden, our planting day experience, community partnerships, public information and outreach in the watershed, and our public park project location and possible future steps. 3 members of our community team will present their experiences, including a volunteer board member of the Owasco Lake Watershed Association who spearheaded the rain garden project, lead watershed inspector of the Owasco Lake Watershed Inspection and Protection Division, and the director of Cayuga County Parks and Trails, both of whom helped plan, coordinate, and implement the project. I would like to first introduce Kim Mills, volunteer board member of the Owasco Lake Watershed Association, who spearheaded the rain garden project. Welcome, Kim.
Thank you, Adam. I first would like to say, as a community volunteer, it's my pleasure to work with 2 outstanding professionals on this presentation and this project in general. To shorten the lengthy names that we have, I will call the Owasco Watershed Lake Association AWLA, and the Owasco Lake Watershed Management Council, the Management Council, and finally Cayuga County Department of Parks and Trails as Parks and Trails. These are the organizations of my partners. I'll describe our project developing a community rain garden at Emerson Park, a public park at the north end of Owasco Lake in Auburn. 2 key points that I'd like to make today. This project was really an exercise in developing partnerships. It was key to what we succeeded so far with. And second, we view this community, this rain garden, as a community outreach event to help educate the public about issues in the watershed and water quality in Owasco Lake. So I begin with a photo of our the end of our planting day. This is October 22nd, Saturday. Last year, the end of our planting day. We have a group of volunteers here from our organizations and a few from the community. And on that day, we planted a 20 by 50, 100 foot, 20 by 50 area or 500 square feet rain garden with approximately 100 native plants. We had a terrific day. Things went extremely well for us, but I'd like to tell you more of our story of developing this project. Adam covered this overview. I'm going to describe a bit more about the motivation and planning for the project, and then our planting day experiences. Then I'll turn it over to my partners. At the end, we'll entertain questions, wrap up with a Q&A. First, our motivation. Our primary motivation is protecting the water quality of Owasco Lake. And towards that end, our goal is to support the Lake Friendly Living program, which is this presentation is a part of the May series. Working from AWLA, the Lake Association, we're interested in reaching all stakeholders in the watershed. And this particular topic might apply primarily to homeowners or lakeshore owners in the watershed. However, you'll see it applies to a public park And we believe it could apply to other organizations or institutions, for example, a school ground or a public library. How did we get started with this project? Well, last year at this time of the year, we had the first monthly series of the Lake Friendly Living webinar series. And I had the pleasure of seeing Dan Siegel of the Plantsman Nursery in Ithaca, New York, present on native plant gardens. And frankly, I was so impressed. And I also didn't know that the use of native plants were as far along in terms of becoming mainstream or widely publicly used. So that really sparked my interest. A short time later, I saw, this is a June 2nd article from the New York Times on the use of native plants. This is an area just outside of Philadelphia. So thinking about Dan's talk and also seeing in mainstream media discussion of native plants, I really felt excited about the question, can we establish a public project to advance this approach? So brainstorming, how did we get started? I'd like to point out the power of excellent partnerships. At this time last year, I was brainstorming how do we develop a project. Preparing for this talk, I went through my email and I was looking for photographs to show you, and you'll see some of those coming up shortly. But I came across this email. Thursday afternoon, June 17th, I wrote an email to Adam Effler, our host of this presentation, saying, Adam, what do you think about establishing a rain garden? That's Thursday afternoon. Friday morning, he says, yes, let's do this. And then by Monday, Adam had already reached Doug Delastrito of Parks and Trails, who immediately agreed that he'd like to participate. So we had a partnership that came together very quickly, and we started this time last year with planning for this project. Some time passed, June and July. By August, we had developed a draft plan. So here's what we did. A number of us came out to Emerson Park and visited various sites on the park, within the park. And Doug Delastrito of Parks and Trails pointed us to a few of the areas where there's often standing water, difficult to maintain areas of the park. So he pointed this out as a possibility. I remember we discussed, can we find a site that has high public visibility? Because our main goal is to reach the public about the use of native plants and supporting lake-friendly living practices. We settled on this approach, or this site pictured here. I'll show you a map in a moment, but it's right near the water. It's right near a break wall. It's right near a large public pavilion used for public events. So it has high visibility. In fact, there's a walking trail right next to our site. So we settled on this site here for those reasons. And in addition, you'll see some mature oak trees in this photograph. That helped me feel that this site was very suitable for a garden site. Doug Delastrito pointed out to us that the history of the site had been used as a fill area for sand and gravel mining. And so we were a bit worried about the soil. We explored that. I'll show you in a minute. So here we have a highly visible garden site right on the water. Here's a aerial view, and if you can see my black circle here, this is the site of our rain garden. This long vertical area here, this is a brick wall walkway out into the lake. This large white building here is the pavilion, which is used for public events. This is a highly visible area. There's a beach and walking trails around this area. So it satisfied that, how do we reach the public? And also it was a wet and difficult area to maintain. A bit more on our planning. Here we are still in August. I'll go to the photographs first. We visited the site. We dug some test holes to have some feeling about the quality of the soil there. And actually the soil looked quite good, even though it was a fill area. We didn't really know what we would find, but we were encouraged by that. We also had we had 2 to 3 nursery visits prior to our planting day. I put 3 stars right here. One of the key things that I learned in talking to the nurserymen, how do you plan a garden? How many plants do you need for a native planting? The idea is to create a native garden where upon maturity, the plants fill an area and it takes very little maintenance. The nurserymen use a rule of thumb of 5 square feet per native perennial plants. And our focus was on perennial plants for this garden. So you can see for 5 square feet or a 500 square foot area, works out nicely to 100 plants. So we started planning on 100 plants in groups or masses of 6 to 8 to 10 plants per mass. To go further in our project, this is still a group of us volunteering to look at how we might develop this project. Doug Dallastreto had to gain approval from the county legislature for us to put this rain garden site in at a public park. We also needed a modest amount of startup money. So Doug made a proposal to the county legislature. Adam Effler and I made proposals to our respective boards for $1,000 for a planting budget to start up this project. So we were successful on all 3 fronts. That next brought us to a visit to a nursery. Just thinking back 2 or 3 slides ago, we have a public pavilion where weddings or community events are held. We want to put in a native plant garden. And there's a common misconception that native plants are wild or maybe not as attractive as other choices in terms of a horticultural design. A visit to the nurseryman nursery showed me very quickly, these are very compelling plants. These native plants are stunning, and we were inspired by this. So our next task was to develop a possible selection of plants and a design for the rain garden. Here's our team visiting the nurserymen and speaking with the experts there, and they were outstanding. So we drafted a list of plants that we thought would be suitable. Our site was full sun, wet site. I'll show you a planting plan in a moment, but we just designated 3 levels of wet site: very wet, moderately wet, and then moist. There's very little slope on the site, and you'll see in our coming photos. So we developed a kind of a wish list of plants that we might choose. And I developed a planting plan following their advice. You see in the drawing there, and I'll show you more detail in a moment, but this is a native garden, so a naturalistic design makes perfect sense. I took the 20 by 50 foot area, designated basically kidney shaped masses, kidney bean shaped masses of where we would plant a particular species, and laid this out, developed a planting list, and then took it to the experts to their advice. I was very pleased. They tweaked this, made some adjustments, but mostly we were on the right track. So here's a view of the planting plan that we had. 10 plants, native species, well adapted to wet conditions, and selected with the advice of the nurseryman for sequence of bloom, attracting butterflies. General overall, these have to be compelling and attractive to the public because of our public site and highly visible garden location. So that was our plan. I maintain records of all the plants that we chose, and I want to track how each of them do because one of our future goals is to expand this garden, and we want to see which plants really thrive and maybe some that don't do as well. So here we are, standing water, our site, standing water 30 days per year on an estimate is a fill area, silty and sandy loam, full sun. Okay, so that's a little bit of background on the motivation. Just to recap, we're interested in establishing a native plant garden. We want to reach the community in the watershed about the lake-friendly living program, and a native garden or a rain garden is a compelling way, I believe, to do that. So next, planting day, October 22nd of last year. I left this blank because on the next screen, it shows we arrived Saturday morning at the site and immediately saw that we needed a plan B. The depression in the foreground of the photograph that's holding water, this was our original planting site. The question of whether the plants would survive in that much water, we believe we had selected plants that were really wet or tolerant of wet conditions. However, there was no way that we could bring a group of volunteers into this site area. We can't dig and plant in standing water. Now, mind, we have 100 plants purchased 2 weeks earlier on a trailer, and we have some members of the community already there ready to help us. So thank you to Doug Delastrito for being flexible. He immediately helped us adjust the planting site. So you'll see we've just moved just down just a bit closer to the waterfront. But this developer introduced an interesting feature. Our original plan was to excavate the soil for 3 to 4 inches, establish a berm on the side for water holding, but also mainly to plant directly into soil as opposed to planting into turf grass. We were forced to take that choice of planting directly into turf grass. I'll explain a bit how we did that. Here we are at the new site, just south of our original choice. And you'll see Allie, you'll hear from Allie in just a moment, but I believe in this photo, she's holding the planting plan, and we brought the plants over on a trailer, 100 perennials, and we're starting to lay them out according to our plan. You see directly into turf. We had a group of, I think 12 or 14 of us. We divided up our group into pairs, or maybe a few people working singly. Each of us took a particular species, and with the layout, following the plan as best we could, we started setting up our plants according to our naturalistic design. You'll see the wet conditions we were working with here on the left. We actually planted sedges in that area and worked out pretty well. It was wet, and digging into the soil was not ideal, but we made it work that day. Here we are, planting is underway. You do see the wet conditions there. So we set the plants out and then planted all of them. That's prior to applying the mulch. I have to say that when we planned this community planting event, I had a fear of a large number of people, soil flying, shovels digging, soil flying, and really not really being able to manage this kind of public planting event at all. I hadn't done that before myself. It worked extremely well. It was a real pleasure chatting with the people while we were working. And it was easy. As I did not imagine how easy this would work as a group activity. Here we have the plants in place. Now, these are small perennials. These are 2-gallon size perennials purchased from the nursery. I didn't comment earlier, but they ranged in price from $10 to $15 each. So on average, a $12 per plant. So these are established but still young perennial plants. So then it takes us to the step of mulching. The nursery recommended cardboard sheeting. And I thought, well, where do we buy cardboard sheeting? Actually, what the nursery uses, they break down cardboard boxes. So Parks and Trails had a supply of broken cardboard boxes. So you don't really see the boxes here in this photo, but first we placed the cardboard sheeting or boxes around the plants, and then we're now applying cardboard or bark mulch on top of it. The cardboard mulch will decay over time, but it will suppress the grass and other weeds in this case. The idea is to have as low maintenance as possible while these plants become mature, and then fill this area and are really self-maintaining. Again, just a comment, native plants are chosen because they don't require fertilizer or pesticide. They don't require that kind of support. They evolved in this region, they're native plants. Here's a picture I took this spring. I was wondering how well we did with the mulching and the cardboard. In just a few areas is the cardboard showing. So with a little bit of attention, we can easily rebury that. We have a few weeds coming up through the mulch. We'll take care of that. There's also a few areas where we need to even up the mulch, perhaps spread some more. Two pictures here of the garden area. On the left is December of last year. I visited the site. It was underwater and ice. I was worried. Here we are on the right of May of this year, just a week ago, and I believe all the plants have survived. The earlier ones are starting to grow. So I'm quite happy about the survival rate through our first winter. You can see on the right photo, we'll improve the mulching situation there. I think we ran just a bit short on planting day. Okay, at this point, next, I'd like to turn it over to Allie Berry from the Management Council.
Thank you, Kim. Kim Mills,
Yes.
volunteer member of the Owasco Watershed Lake Association. I would like to now introduce Allie Berry, lead watershed inspector for the Owasco Lake Watershed Inspection and Protection Division. Allie is a leader in education towards conservation within the watershed, and she was an integral player both for coordinating the rain garden project and implementing the project. Allie, welcome.
Thank you so much for the introduction, Adam. So I just wanted to mention, as watershed residents, we are all unified by one common factor, and that's our appreciation for Owasco Lake. And fitting in with our theme for Lake Friendly Living Month, watershed resilience, or the ability for a watershed to maintain its characteristics through climate change or other anthropogenic disturbance is, can be improved on by partnerships, education, and outreach. By partnering with one another and sharing our collective knowledge and experiences, as diverse as they are, they can all add up to help protect our freshwater resources. So today I'm just going to go over an outline here of what I'm going to discuss. That's going to be who we are, who our partners are, an overview of our outreach efforts, issues posed by stormwater runoff, and how we were involved in the rain garden planting. So I'm just going to cover our mission statement here, and I'm just going to read this here to you. So our mission is to make regular and thorough inspections of Owasco Lake, its watercourses, and its watershed to ascertain compliance with the rules and regulations of the Owasco Lake watershed. And then also we provide educational outreach to the watershed community to foster lake stewardship. So as inspectors, we strive to ensure that our water quality is held to a high standard by providing those living within the watershed with the knowledge and tools that they need to help improve water quality with their actions. So I'm not going to read through all of our partners here, but I thought it would be nice to give a little bit of an overview of all the folks that we work with to achieve these goals. Since 2018, the Owasco Lake Watershed Management Council, or as Kim mentioned, the Management Council, assumed the daily administration of the Inspection and Protection Division, and they coordinate actions to protect and restore the health of the Owasco Lake watershed to ensure that Owasco Lake will serve as a drinking water source, a recreational asset, and an economic driver, of course. It's such an important resource. So as you can see in the diagram, collaboratively, we work with a number of partners from the state, from different nonprofits as well, including ALWA and Parks and Trails. The Inspection and Protection Division's office was actually housed at the Parks and Trails office for quite some time. So these partners are really key to achieving our efforts and allow us to combine those efforts and experiences to protect the Owasco Lake watershed. So overall, throughout our education and outreach, we do a couple of things, and I'm just listing the top three that are the most common as of recently. Lake Friendly Living is a big one. Welcome to the Lake Friendly Living Month. I wanted to mention that the council does have a Lake Friendly Living pledge that would require homeowners to incorporate Lake Friendly Living practices to minimize runoff to Owasco Lake and any associated pollutants that may be carried along with it. And then just a few to mention that might include refraining from using excessive fertilizers to prevent harmful algal blooms, a problem that our entire state is struggling to deal with, working towards practicing best management practices for land use, which could include implementing a rain garden at home or at a park, as you have seen here. And then another could be, maintaining your septic system. And there's about 9 others, or not others, but 9 total different actions that could be performed to pretty much minimize runoff and any associated pollutants. And then, of course, program support and development. We were involved in the Rain Garden project, which we'll get more into here in a moment. We also do training. So Camp Owasco, we did one last year where we taught their staff how to identify harmful algal blooms, how to report them, and then the concerns associated with them, and what we understand of why they occurred to begin with. So we always do our best to help support and develop these programs. And then finally, we also help to increase awareness of grant funding when that's available. And the top 2, I would say, would be the WQIP, or Water Quality Improvement Project, through the Cuyahoga County Soil and Water Conservation District, which can help homeowners get some cost sharing to deal with some erosion that they might have between different properties, and a lot of other things as well. Definitely helpful to check that out if you're in one of those predicaments. I know we got a lot of rain last year. Another is the septic replacement program, which is through the Cuyahoga County Department of Health. If you're within a certain distance to the lake, you might be able to receive funding to upgrade or replace your septic system. So overall, we do what we can to inform residents of actions that they can take to improve water quality through direct action, recognize those water quality issues, let them know how to report them, and then share any helpful information that we can with our, from our partners when needed. So getting back into this, pretty much the motivation for this is stormwater runoff. So why is this an issue? As you can see in this diagram that I borrowed from Michigan State, we've got a lot of impermeable surfaces such as roofs and sidewalks. I mean, you name it. And as rainwater hits these surfaces, you don't have any infiltration. So instead, all those contaminants can be picked up through stormwater, and that can move and enter storm drains, flow directly into streams, can flow directly into Owasco Lake, which is damaging for our water quality, of course. It can increase the likelihood of harmful algal blooms. It can damage fish populations and all kinds of ecology. So less stormwater runoff means less channel erosion. Some certain pollutants as well as some nutrients can be, attached to soil particles, and then adversely impacts water resources. So rain gardens can help collect that stormwater runoff, intercept it, absorb it, and that percolation helps eliminate some of that contamination that can reach our very precious drinking water source. So a little bit on the rain garden preparation and how we are involved. These are photos of myself and Adam Effler, our executive director, and your host today. So we stopped down at Plantsman Nursery with our trailer, and they're located in Groton. And as Kim was mentioning, they provide a fantastic diversity of perennial species that are native to upstate New York. I actually think they're one of the top nurseries that do provide this value to our region. And all of these plants are accustomed to thriving in the Finger Lakes. So that might be why we were so lucky this past winter when all of our plants were underwater and under ice. So they were fantastic to work with, very knowledgeable, and highly recommend paying them a visit if you're looking to get more native plants in your garden or develop a rain garden yourself. So a little bit of, what a rain garden is, getting into a little bit more detail. Essentially, a rain garden is a landscape bed, that you might find, pretty much anywhere in any community. But the difference is that they are water loving and deep rooted native perennials and shrubs most of the time that can help increase the capture of stormwater runoff, help infiltrate that, as I had mentioned previously, and then thus, protecting nearby water bodies, ditch networks, etc. They're often planted downslope. Water doesn't move uphill, so we want to capture that downslope. So we put them in low-lying areas typically to soak up and intercept all of that rainwater that flows off of these impermeable surfaces that can cause so much damage to our water bodies. Conventional lawns in comparison don't have the same capacity. They are helpful to prevent erosion. When we're out on site visits, we often recommend that people seed and grass their lawns. But when you have, these plants that are deep rooted and water loving and a bit taller, they can capture more of that stormwater runoff, and they require less maintenance. Everybody wants to reduce the amount of yard work they have to do, I guess, unless you love getting out there. I know a lot of people do, especially some folks here with us today. But I also wanted to mention that the EPA states that pollutants carried by stormwater runoff actually accounts for 70% of all water pollution. So this isn't just a minor issue. This is something the entire country experiences. And with our increasing rainfall, if you recall last year, how devastating that was for some folks, it really is, planting a rain garden is really something that could be beneficial for kind of removing that pollutant-laden water, allowing it to be filtered and absorbed, and of course, protecting our local ecology as well as the water quality that 45,000 plus people rely on. So why plant one if that didn't convince you enough? They're beautiful. They're, easy to maintain. They provide storage for flood waters. If you get a wet spot in your yard, I know a lot of folks have them. It's an easy solution to soak that up in a beautiful way. They can bring butterflies to your yard if you enjoy seeing pollinators, of course, or an effective habitat for wildlife, especially being that they are native and perennial. They come back every year, so they can add some aesthetic value to your home and your neighborhood. So that's about it from us. Feel free to jot down our contact information if you see any water quality concerns or you have any more detailed questions about our involvement in the rain garden, or if you would like any advice on how you can get one started yourself. This is a photo of myself and Jillian Aloisio, our other watershed inspector, with a photo of our annual report that we just distributed to all municipalities. So if you'd like a copy, just stop by at your local municipality office and they should have some to provide to you. But yes, that is all from me, and thank you guys so much.
Thank you, Allie. Allie Berry, Lead Watershed Inspector for the Owasco Lake Watershed Inspection and Protection Division. Thank you so much for your presentation this morning. I would now introduce Doug Delastrito, Director of Cayuga County Parks and Trails. Parks and Trails was an integral partner for this rain garden project, and we are very grateful for their partnership. Doug, welcome.
Very good. Thanks, Adam. I appreciate it. So I just want to talk briefly just about what the installation looks like, what we've done on the ground, what our motivations were. The chat box, I do have it open if anybody has questions as we're going along. Please feel free to add those in. Adam, I'm assuming you can see the screen. Are we good? Okay. No, that's the whole thing. I did the whole thing. It's all done. So here's our site selection. So obviously, Emerson Park, that was the site that we selected, is 150 acres of property. We mow approximately 80 of that. We obviously have several wet lawn areas. And by that, I don't really mean seasonally. So I kind of put a little bit of a description in here. These are chronically wet areas. They basically create areas that are unmaintainable in a traditional lawn sense. Since 2018, we've seen more storm events and therefore an increase in this acreage. So we've identified 10 to 15 acres of that property that they just really are chronically wet. We're unable to mow them or maintain them in a traditional sense as a lawn. So, of these sites, we selected the area that Kim showed on the map. It's west of the Emerson Park Pavilion. If you're familiar, that's the facility at Emerson Park on the end of Owasco Lake where they do a lot of weddings. It has direct drainage to the Owasco River. And therefore we selected it as basically the most important site to address because of proximity and volume. So our goals were to establish a rain garden there in this chronically wet area. we basically are not able to mow it. It was overgrown. In a natural way, we wanted to formalize that. So basically, we wanted to test the design. So we took that area, which is approximately, as Kim mentioned, about 500 square feet. We want to see what the maintenance is going to be like. And then we want to be able to roll that out throughout the property and throughout the park system, actually. So we wanted to install native hydrophilic plants, the assist in that site stormwater runoff diversion, create an area for better infiltration and uptake by the plants, as Allie mentioned, and filtration, obviously using the mechanical filtration of the plant material and as a grass waterway there, and where we actually outflow the overflow for the area runs onto lawn, which would be a grass waterway to control and filter our runoff. And obviously there's a goal to reduce mowed acreage, which has its benefits. Just for reference, that we did about 500 square feet of that area. And this is the entire drainage area, as you can see here. And we're talking, so we did the little yellow box there is the test area, if you will. So that's the rain garden that was established in October of last year. It's about 500 square feet. The area that is, directly around it that we would consider a problematic wet area is about 5,000 square feet, and then the area that's there is about 10 times that size. Obviously the drainage area is a much larger area, so obviously we're trying to do that. So off to the left, you'll see there actually is a drop inlet or a storm drain at the end of that green circular body we have designated, and that's that grass waterway or that infiltration area. So what happens is we actually installed one culvert, a small pipe that goes from one side of that roadway to the other to prevent some of the damming and the standing water that's there, but it will always be and remains to be a wet area. So we have an overflow there, but it overflows here within the park system. We tend to put those out on the lawn, similar to most municipalities, diverting gutters and rainwater out into the lawn as opposed to storm sewers. This is another effort to do that. So we take this catchment area, we do some filtration through the rain garden. During a storm event, when that's overwhelmed, it actually passes over that roadway and through it over this grass waterway, which is our infiltration and treatment area. And then eventually, if it overwhelms that whole system, it does go through a drop. Does go through a drop inlet and flows into the Owasco River, which is the river course that you see on the left side of the picture there. So obviously the effort is to minimize that. So this is what we're looking for our outcomes. We want to designate areas as rain gardens, as pollinator gardens. We also have a riparian buffer zone program within the Parks Department where we're trying to pull back our regular lawn maintenance from any water courses, whether they be river, lake frontage, or stream on various properties throughout the county. So we're trying to reduce our mowing. Reducing obviously reduces your input costs. So we've got equipment time in there. We've got labor costs and the use of fossil fuels that we can pull back from. And then, as Kim mentioned, fertilizer and pesticide input is nothing. It goes really to nothing at that point for a rain garden. If you're using native plants, if your design is good and you're able to, maintain it in mostly mechanical methods there, especially until they're established. We're trying to decelerate all of our surface runoff, prevent soil loss and here within the property. That's property damage anywhere where it happens. It gives runoff and stormwater the time to infiltrate and that sediment to filter or basically settle right there before entering storm drains, ditches, tributaries, and in this case, the Owasco River. So, and we also wanted to create an opportunity that was right there for the public to see. We have a lot of traffic throughout the park. We have almost 300,000 people a year come through the facility. Lots of walking, just a great place to be on the lake. And so we wanted to create an opportunity where you can see the implementation of it. We consider this as phase one. There's a much larger area there as identified in the previous slide that we're going to continue to develop that. Kim and I just actually spoke before this meeting about some planning to do some plugs and to move some material out and expand that area into a much larger area, and it's a great alternative to traditional lawns. It addresses your on-site drainage issues and then the offsite impacts of the runoff. I know when I started in this role 5 years ago, the thought of not mowing some of the areas was a bit foreign, quite frankly. And as we look at it now, there's many opportunities to not do weekly mowing, maybe do annual mowing, and all of these reduce our inputs, they reduce the runoff, they reduce the use of fossil fuels. And obviously these are all desired outcomes just from a departmental standpoint as we're going forward. That's my contact information over there. Again, my name is Doug Dahlstruder. I'm the director of the Parks and Trails Department in Cayuga County. If you'll indulge me, since I went through that kind of quick, I'm going to show you one more slide of another project that was here and talk a little bit about the infrastructure impacts that some of these can have. So at Emerson Park, there are a couple of culvert pipes that were installed in 2000. So basically they run from the lake to the Owasco River. They were intended to drain a large embayment area that's out in front of the park. No protection was really put in front of those. Last year, to the cost of about $40,000 to $50,000, we had those culvert pipes cleaned. As you can see in the picture on the left there, they actually were divers that actually had to go into these large elliptical 42-inch diameter pipes. The only thing that was really in there is sedimentation. Now, this is from the lake, and obviously this is the north end of the lake, so heavy south winds, those were there. But the sedimentation, the power of that sedimentation is quite incredible. You know, so we talk about as a system, as a lake system, trying to control the sedimentation. This is the cost and this is the outcome, you know, of sedimentation. These pipes run 150 feet, all underground from the lake to the Owasco River. Over half of that was filled with sedimentation, all the way to the top of that. You know, and this is not an area that has high flow. So this is all suspended sedimentation that's in there, and over time affects your infrastructure. So, you know, we think about the rain garden as a small kind of input and you're controlling that sedimentation, but these have large infrastructure and community costs of not, you know, controlling our sedimentation and not being aware of the things that we can do to limit that. So it's just an example of how what you do, like on your own home property, or what we do as municipalities or counties, do in a larger sense pay dividends down in the future as we, you know, make efforts to control these. So that's just an aside, but it is. And so what we did further this year, as you can see in the center and right picture, we actually got a permit from the DEC to put you know, basically a buffer on the outside of that, a big filtration wall, large open stone to decelerate the sedimentation, so the sedimentation can be removed before it enters these filtration pipes that basically just move water from that embayment. So big costs, and we can make all these little moves to prevent some of these big costs and, you know, have more maintainable and healthier water bodies in the future. So that's me, and that's all I had. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you, Doug. Doug Delastrito, Director of the Department of Parks and Trails for Cayuga County. Thank you for your presentation this morning. Also, thanks for sharing an example of the greater costs and issues associated with sedimentation in the lake. Okay, I would like to shift into a Q&A period. I did see a question was posed within the chat box here. So I'll open this up to the group. What was the total cost of the rain garden project? Also, would it benefit the wet area to expand this effort if you have plans to do so? Kim, maybe
Question over here.
Question for you.
Yep.
Yeah, I can address the first part of Caitlin's question. Are you hearing me, Adam? Okay. We had a $1,000 planting budget. We spent, I think it was $850 of that for this initial planting. So that was 500 square feet. Doug, would you like to comment on expanding to the wet area?
Yeah, so Kim was very helpful in actually identifying close to this. There was a sedimentation or stormwater basin designed and built in 2011 that was associated with the rehabilitation of the Emerson Park Pavilion, the wedding pavilion that's there. Associated with that project, they put in an area that would be, I don't know, 2,000 square feet probably of an area that it's separated. All the storm drains from the building, and anything that was underground infrastructure flows into that basin and then is able to sheet flow over that lawn area out of there. So Kim and I went through that area. We tromped through the wilderness, if you will, and identified a lot of material that we're going to actually use to plug and expand that. That's all. I think Kim refers to it as volunteer material. A lot of that has grown over time in the last, 10 to 11 years. And quite frankly, is similar to the plant material that was obtained from the nursery. A lot of sedge, many rushes, and so some native plantings that are in there. And in an effort to expand that area, and knowing that we're going to take up so many square feet, per plant, we have a great plan. And Kim is obviously very gracious to get us some more volunteers to help do a planting day again, where we're going to pull a lot of that volunteer material and start plugging that entire area. So really, the cost for us is it would have a small labor cost associated with it because the plant material is there. I think these are great public projects that many groups, we have friends groups associated with the park. Kim has brought a lot of volunteers to the park, as have Aula and the management council. So, those groups provide a lot of that labor, and it's either labor or plant material is really your costs here. So, if you can get the labor taken care of, plant material can always be brought in. And further space plantings, things like that. Yes, they take longer to fill in, but it's the establishment of the area, and the commitment to doing it long term is really where the benefit is. And you really can't put a price tag on that.
Also, another comment on the budget, Parks and Trails contributed mulch and cardboard for this project, so there was no cost there. Adam and I have the plan of purchasing a sign. I don't know if that would cost $100, $200. Once we have an established garden, an educational sign for the public to learn more about a rain garden and also how they might get involved, but we haven't done that yet. I see a second question regarding online resources on how to get started. Yeah, there are terrific online resources. I would recommend the New York State DEC website for information on getting started on this project. Also, if you search for native plant nurseries, they all tend to publish plant lists where you can select the plants by perennials, by trees, by sun and shade, wet and dry. So they make it really easy for you to select according to your conditions.
That's great. Thank you, Kim, and thank you, Doug. So I see one more question. I believe you addressed the online resources question, Kim. Here's one. We see pipes charging directly into streams that create more erosion. Any thoughts on addressing a chronic problem like that? Perhaps that might be a question for Allie. Do you have a response to that one, Allie?
Yeah, we see that a lot in the Owasco Lake watershed too. It's a very common problem, especially with the rain events that we've been having recently. I know several fire lanes and steep roads that have collapsed because of the ongoing erosion from culverts. Some of the time it's because they're undersized. Some of the time, if you get 4 inches of rain in a day, there's only so much that you can prevent. It's not really the most natural scenario that we've been seeing. So typically in our watershed, the way that we address issues like that is just contacting your local soil and water conservation district. They really are the leading experts on, figuring out the costs associated with repair, the best ways to repair that. Every site is so specific based on the conditions of, the slope, the drainage area, the reason for it eroding in the first place. So I would recommend reaching out to them. That's also something the WQIP grant might be able to help as well, if that's available to you at your conservation district. Occasionally, if these issues are affecting a number of homeowners, they will do a cost share where they can pitch in a certain percentage of matching funds to address that issue. So I would certainly recommend reaching out to Soil and Water, seeing if you can get them out on site to observe that issue. Another thing is to ensure, if you're installing drainage pipes yourself, to minimize erosion, is to make sure that those outlet pipes have outlet protection or stone. As water comes out of those pipes, the velocity scours out underneath those culverts and other different kinds of pipes, essentially. So if it's undersized and you've got a lot of water going through there, it's really going to scour that up quickly. It might happen in a matter of a week. If you've got a bigger culvert and it's kind of, moving, that might be a more, I don't know, I guess complicated issue that might even require a whole plan. So it really depends on the site. I would start with reaching out to your local conservation district. Hope that helps.
Thank you, Allie. We'll take two more questions briefly here. We do need to wrap up at 11:55 for another webinar that starts at noon. So one is having to do more specifically with the pipe discharges. Curious about the 4 to 6 inch pipes that you would see directly discharging into streams in the form of downspouts from roofs or otherwise. I'm familiar with the fact that certain municipalities have codes that require discharge to a lawn within a property rather than to a driveway or to a street. I think is in some instances poses a solution to that problem. Allie, do you have any more comments on that?
Yeah, so we see a lot in site plans that there will be, a French drain or a gutter helping to deal with downspouts for roofs, et cetera. And sometimes there's a lot of different BMPs that can be used. You can do grass waterways, you can provide outlet protection, and there's a lot of other practices that can be recommended, again, through soil and water conservation districts, or if it's a greater problem and it's a residential problem, engineers can help with that as well. In addition, different architects can include recommendations in those kinds of plans. So swales, best management practices, rain gardens could also help infiltrate as well as intercept the velocity of that. So rain gardens could be used in that practice as well. So there's a few different options you have, but I'm happy to discuss more over email if you'd like. I can provide some resources.
Thank you, Allie. Yeah, so for those who are interested in resources, and I observed that Kim responded to one question where there was a request for resources on the specific plant species that were selected for the rain garden. We will follow up with the contact list that was provided with the registration information for this webinar, and we can provide some of those details to the group. I would like to thank, first of all, our panelists for taking the time and pulling together a presentation to share with the community for this event. And I would also like to thank all of our attendees and participants for engaging in this webinar forum. Thank you all, and I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of your day.
Great. Thanks, Adam.
Yeah.
Bye now.
Everyone.